Hello students, welcome to another one of your flip lectures. Today we're going to discuss culture. We're going to look at sociology and introduction to American culture. So sociology, which we're going to be doing a little bit of this year, is simply the study of a society. The idea is that we look at how do we order our universe? How do we make sense of the world around us? There's a lot of different things that make up our culture, or are the structures that basically we order our everyday experiences and explain them. There are things like religion, our traditions, language, the values that we believe in, our music, literature, art, recipes, food, commercials, etc., and ultimately our sense of community, who we believe is us and who us is, as well as who is them, who is the other, who is not a part of our group. So what is culture? Culture, the definition of it is a design for living. It is the plans, the recipes, the rules for governing our behavior, and culture includes our values, norms, the sanctions things that we think are acceptable, as well as our technology, our symbols, and also language has a big part of culture. So an interesting question, and one that we're going to explore in class, is what do you think makes up American culture? I'd like you to pause it right now, and I would like you to make a list of everything you think makes up American culture. The interesting thing is that people don't really agree on what American culture is supposed to be like, and it has changed a lot over time. And right now, there are two main competing ways of explaining how American culture is created. One of them is the Great American Melting Pot. The idea that all of these cultures are going to be mixed in and they're supposed to be melted into an American culture. This is called assimilation. That we all bring our own traditions and cultures, but we mix them all together and we all assimilate, we all come into one American culture. The other competing idea about American culture is known as the salad bowl. That basically each group in the United States, each culture is supposed to retain its own unique identity, and that there is not supposed to be assimilation. That it's perfectly fine to just maintain whatever culture that you had without actually assimilating into what people would call the American culture. And also, members of the salad bowl, those people who believe in this will usually say that there is not really an American culture. So for the rest of this flipped lecture, we're going to look at a couple of terms that you're going to need to know throughout the year. The first is ethnocentrism. Ethno, right, the word ethnic, and centrism meaning center. And ethnocentrism is the idea that you compare and judge all other cultures and all the people within that culture based upon the idea that your culture is superior to theirs. So the idea would be that Americans judged the American Indians to be savages because their culture was different than theirs. So if you're ethnocentric, you believe your culture is superior, and so you judge the other based upon that preconceived notion. The second term is social structure. And a social structure is the idea that people interact in roles that are related to each other in a bigger system. The idea, a good example of this would be a family. A family is a social structure. You have the different members of your family, and they each have a way to relate to each other. Either the parent, the child, the brother, the sister, or at Cristo Rey, we have a social structure made up of students, teachers, the principal, and all the other people. So a big part of that social structure is the idea of social groups, which we pretty much just call groups. And this refers to any collection of people who are organized in some way, but are also conscious that they share something in common. This can be something as narrow as your family that shares something in common. Or it could be your church, where you all share the belief in Catholicism. Or it could be the United States as kind of something that we all have in common. We are all part of the United States. Now, a reference group basically refers to the group from which you draw your idea of what is normal and the group from which you look to give order and meaning to your life. So if you were a Catholic, your reference group in religion is Catholicism. You look to that organization to basically give you the norms, like the way to live your life, and also to give you meaning. What is the meaning of your life? If you're a Catholic, then it tells you a certain thing. But if you were Jewish, it would tell you something different. So that's what I mean by reference group. So a couple more terms. One is social role. And a social role refers to the performance of the normal tasks regarded as appropriate for the occupant, the person who is in a particular social position. You all have a role. You have a role as a student, as a member of a family, and there are certain norms that go along with that role. Also, social position refers to your location in the social space that you find yourself. For example, a teacher, or a mother, or a father, or a banker, or an artist. Your social position basically is kind of where you are in a social space, where you fit into society as a greater thing. So just a few more terms. Social stratification is an important term in American history because it refers to the fact that society is divided into different levels. We call these strata or layers, whose occupants don't always have equal access to social opportunities and rewards. When we talk about inequality in the United States, a lot of this results from social stratification because power, property, prestige, wealth is not equal among all social groups. And so, social stratification is the idea that these groups tend to separate themselves out and create what are called social classes. And a social class is a group of people who have a similar amount of wealth, property, and income in the stratification system. So for example, the upper social class would be the wealthiest Americans, and then the middle class, the lower class, and other things like that. There's also the idea of blue collar and white collar, depending on what jobs you work. But the idea is that there are social classes, and these social classes are not equal, which means there is social stratification. So folks, the last page of terms, the belief. A belief is an idea or understanding about physical or social reality. It could be factual or it could be evaluative. Factual meaning that it's a belief that you think what it is true, or it is evaluative in that it's not necessarily a fact, but it's more of an idea, like what is the meaning of your life or what is God. So belief is something that you understand or you think that you understand about the world. Now, a value is a belief that actually guides your actions and your judgments and influences what you do in your life. These are kind of the high-end values, like honesty. And so values basically say that specific behaviors are better than others, that some things are socially preferable to their alternatives. And so basically, value ranks the different actions and choices that you can take. So if you value honesty, then you will always tell the truth as opposed to telling a lie, even if it could basically, save somebody being their feelings hurt. A value is a belief that guides your actions and judgments. So what's a symbol? A symbol is an object or an act that basically has meaning to some social group. So for example, a flag is a symbol that means more than just the images on the thing. The cross is a symbol of Christianity. The Bible is a symbol of Christianity. So think about what are kind of maybe some symbols in your life. Then finally, what is a norm? A norm, coming from, normal, right? Sounds like normal, is a guideline for your action. It is the standard of behavior that you are held to. It is the social rules that tell you what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So for example, the norm at Cristo Rey is that you don't basically talk out in class and disrespect a teacher. And so norms are the standards of behavior that people in a society live by. So just a final thought here. This year we're going to be talking about how culture forms how we think and also how we think can form our culture. Examples of how culture forms how we think. The culture at Cristo Rey and the things we teach about the grad at grad and men and women for others, they form how you relate to the world. Whether or not you believe they do or not, they do. But also things like People magazine, Culture tells us that certain things are normal or are not normal. The culture of Facebook forms how we think because a lot of people live now a public life in private. And so Facebook is a cultural thing. It's a way that we kind of organize ourselves, but that affects the way we think because we think in terms of kind of the internet, Facebook, these things. Another example would be like rappers like Chief Keef, people who kind of glorify crime and these other things. That culture being accepted can lead to societies believing that kind of crime is more permissible. It's an interesting idea. But also, how we think, what's going on in our lives, also affects our culture. Great example is to be The Great Gatsby, a book you will read later in the year. It was written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it captured the way people were thinking about life in the 1920s. In the 1980s, Rocky IV came out, and in the middle of the Reagan presidency and the Cold War, where Rocky Balboa had to go fight and defeat the boxer from the Soviet Union. Dora the Explorer, basically the idea that demographics in the United States are changing, have led to a kids show that has a large Spanish component becoming popular. In the 60s, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was a movie that dealt with the issue of interracial couples, which was a big kind of changing attitude in the 60s. And the Cosbys in the 80s were America's family. And basically changing attitudes about who belonged in American culture led to the popularity of having a black family on television. So these are just a few examples. We'll look at more throughout the year of how our culture has a big effect on our history.